thank you all for being here. We're going to have a short Q&A. This is a workshop production, so they like to hear feedback about the music, about any aspect of it you have thoughts on or questions about. I'm going to start off with a question for the composer, for Jerome. I know you're already talking about further performances and productions of the opera, and do you imagine it having a larger orchestration when it's fully staged?
When this thing began, it was going to be a piano. Then I thought, well, I'll add a synthesizer to play string parts. Then I would add a little bit more. And then Susan said, well, why don't you just ask us what you want? So I said, okay, I'll take a string quartet, flute, guitar, and a drum.
Wow.
And now that I've heard it, I can hear other things go into that. So it will be totally different, hopefully, the next time we do it.
Does anyone have any comments? Any questions for anyone involved in the production? Yes?
Well, I don't know if it's not too different because it's beautiful.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes?
Well, it was an amazing, stunning performance, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And the librettist, I was curious, I really loved the play of Balone and Allah, the way you played with that several times in the production. Maybe you could speak a little about that.
That was totally not on purpose. But I'm glad you noticed it. It does, the sounds together are beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I'm curious about the location of Fremont.
Yes.
I grew up there.
Well, this libretto was begun in 2012, in the summer of 2012. And when I decided to use Afghan refugees, I began doing a little research. And there, at that time, the highest concentration of Afghan refugees was located in Fremont, California, and it was actually called Little Kabul. And I don't think that the population of that concentration was enormous, but they stayed among themselves from everything that I researched, and so that's the place.
Yeah, I found this particularly moving.
Yeah.
And I'm not often moved by contemporary opera.
Here, here.
It's completely and there's a particular aspect of it which is maybe a little delicate. And it's this, that in this time, a piece like this that makes you feel real compassion for people who come into the country from a different culture. I think it's a very beautiful and timely thing. And you know, and for that to come out of the beautiful Bible story of Ruth, and Keats, in tears among the alien corn. Oh, it's beautiful.
Well, I got quite lucky with the timing of this, because we did have significant refugee problems in the world in 2012 when I was working on this. However, I was telling Ben this last night after dinner, and I realized that I have a particular interest in refugees and people who live in other cultures, because for 5 years my husband and I lived together in Japan, and they're not extremely welcoming people to foreigners. And sometimes I would cry when I was by myself because I felt quite marginalized. And I took comfort reading in some of the Old Testament passages how God would say to Israel, reach out to the foreigners, because you were once in Egypt.
Yeah.
And it's a theme everywhere to reach out to the marginalized and to the foreigner especially. So I think maybe subconsciously I was drawn to this because of that aspect.
Another question in terms of culture clashes. In some ways, it seems like there's a tension between sort of an American ideal here and a maybe more ancient ideal. Particularly where the story goes. How did you feel that the American sort of way to do it would be like, no, go with your heart, follow what you want, be young and strong, and then the idea of duty and sacrifice is in some ways something that is further and further lost, particularly in the millennial generation. Can you speak to sort of how you decided to go where you did with it in ending?
Well, I wanted that conflict to be very strong, and I thought Rachel really did a beautiful job showing. I ended it the way I ended it because in the book of Ruth, she does marry Boaz. And I think most people read through that book and think, oh, they lived happily ever after. But I've always read that, read some subtext and wondered, did she really like that guy? or was he just the kinsman redeemer, just doing what he was supposed to do? Because, you know, it is unusual in our culture that we get to select our means of happiness, and other people have more of the idea of the happiness of the group and fitting in. So I really wanted that tension because I'm sure that refugees struggle with that all the time. And in some ways, all of us are refugees from something. So.
Well, I don't want to dominate, but I have to say the singers were quite amazing. And I didn't see a theater director, but the way that you used the simple props and all of your actions, they so contributed to the thing. And I just found it amazing. Do you do this in Central Theater, Central City Theater?
We don't do very new works. There are contemporary pieces that are written specifically for the ensemble that Central City sends us, like community performances. But we're all actors.
Really?
It's
Really,
required.
yeah.
I would say one word about this. This is designed as a workshop, so they've only been working on this week, so that's why they're using their music. And part of the real benefit, and I hope that you will all give Jerome and I as much feedback as you can. We want to revise this and make it the best that it can be. So watching them at rehearsals and talking to them and having them ask us questions was really educational. And when I started writing the words, I have to give a shout out to Laura Stuckey, who took my words to Jerome, who sang in her choir. And I was flabbergasted when I got a message from him that said, hey, my name's Jerome, I have this experience, and I hope you don't mind, but I put your words to music, and what do you think of this? And when I listened to it, I thought, your music is fantastic, and my words really need a lot of work. And from the rest of this year, he and I have just had the most delightful collaboration via the computer, because he and his wife have moved to Texas, but he's retired, so I've had a hard time keeping up with him. It's just been an incredible privilege to have a musician take my words and put them to music, and then for both of us to hear these professionals perform, it's just amazing.
Jen?
If you're thinking about expanding this at all, I'm wondering if you're familiar with the old movie now about 20 years old called Hester Street, which was on a similar theme but with an Orthodox Jewish community in New York.
I am not.
And it might be worth looking at it because it treats the same kind of issue at a feature length.
We'll watch it.
It's a really good double bill with Warren Holt's Cemetery, from the Shaw's chamber, all Williams, Riders to the Sea.
Oh.
Again?
Okay.
I'll toss it out just, because it can get conversation going in terms of revisions. If you're looking to expand the story like further and make it longer, I was thinking there could be a fourth character. Are you prepared, Code?
Yeah.
You could have a base also to sort of balance it out. And, I get them feeling like she has this sort of fantasy in her head about, having someone else in love and whatever else. And you could have another character as a man who maybe is an American who sees.
It's a tenor. That's a
Exactly,
tenor.
that's a tenor.
We always-
So, I mean, in some ways, I get maybe the love triangle you're going for is between those two. She's being pulled between those two streets, and maybe that would mess that up. But maybe it might make it more poignant if she had an American person who perhaps didn't have as much means, but this was a sort of pullback to her native culture, and this didn't make her mother happier. So that could be an interesting thing to do.
That's a really interesting idea.
I mean, some of this has a practical, logistical basis, because in the course, we start with the dramatic triad. And I say, select 3 characters that represent the range, the vocal ranges, and have a tension that is inherent in their relationships. So there's the father and a daughter, and then there's the man that the father doesn't want the daughter to marry. It doesn't write itself, but it creates a tension that gets our attention and moves forward. So when they come out of what I do with them, the workshop, they really do have 3 strong characters. Of course, others can be added, and I think that's a very good idea. You might want to think about that. I've been ignoring this side, so sorry.
I was interested if you were going to expand it, maybe it's too soon, if you just saw the first performance.
Yeah.
But what you would want to add, or if you had ideas of how you would add.
Well, when I said expand, maybe I meant revise, because there were things that when Ben read through it and when the singers read through it, they had questions about, and they were asking us, what did you mean? And there are places that Ben suggested maybe you could put this here and move this here. So I think that's probably our first step, is moving some things around and adding a few more interludes. And the idea of more characters and making it a fuller opera, that's a new thought for me, but I love the idea of a suit.
Okay, David has it.
I have a question. My question is for all of the artists who live with this now, so we're incredibly grateful to you. I kept on seeing moves towards acting. I kept on imagining blocking it and things like that. But for all of you, and perhaps especially with Ben, who has lived most closely with this music, what kinds of, since this is a workshop and lots of folks who don't necessarily get to see how this process works, what kinds of things would you suggest to the composer and the librettist yourselves, having lived inside it as actors, as players, as conductor, music director? What would you have for them?
In public?
Don't air the dirty laundry, right?
On
show
film.
the process. This is the
Yeah,
process.
in public.
This is a workshop, and so.
Please.
I would say, some of it is very technical. I won't bore the audience with some of that. There are moments, we talked about a lot of it in the workshop, is that there are 2 things informing character. Well, there are 3 things really when you have staging. I think there are 2 things informing character. One is the text and one is the music. And for the students in the poetry course, who'll be writing libretti in a year or 2, it's important to think about how music affects the words and how the words are read and what it adds. Sometimes in opera you don't have to say something. In theater you don't always have to say something too. Sometimes the best way to say something in theater is not have the characters talk about what they're feeling, but to have a purely theatrical moment. And sometimes in opera it's good to leave space for a purely musical moment. There were some spots I was thinking about last night, and I wanted to go back. I'm conducting from an iPad, and my iPad died, so I just get a little. There might be some opportunities in a place where you don't have to be explicit with what the characters are saying, but you can leave room for Jerome's voice to come through, in finding a dramatic spot. And then we talked about the place. There's a place where I want an interlude, some kind of musical resolution where the characters come at a kind of impasse. And for me, I want it to resolve more broadly. Not because of opera, but hour.
Jan again.
One thought, the music I thought was just wonderful and had the right tone and texture for everything. The only thing is, if you were to extend it to any greater length, I'm wondering if there could be a little variation in tempo and the structure, so that where everything is quite legato all the way through, and at almost the same pace all the way through. Are there places where it could be sped up, slowed down, and made more staccato or whatever, just for the sake of mirroring tone or for variety?
When we got it at one point, I wanted her to write in a little comic scene to give us relief, because this thing is heavy, heavy, heavy.
Yeah, you have Jerome to thank for the places that you laughed, because he wrote to me and said, "This is too serious.
Yeah.
You need some humor," and I
Yeah.
said, "This is not a funny." And he was very politely persistent, and so yes.
Okay, in the front here.
Just back to Susan, your point of seeing, you made three strong characters that kind of hold their position. And so you had the response, you wondered whether she was ever happy with Boaz if you take her to being Ruth rather than her current character. And I kind of had a different viewpoint of when her mother-in-law says, well, children, does she have an attraction where, well, that might be interesting, or that might be an entree into coming to love him, though he wouldn't be her first choice as a male partner. But some places where you could play with her as a growing character rather than forever, I want to find love, and that's a perfectly valid place to want to have children from too. But if this is going to happen, can she transition a little bit to find a place in her heart that could be different?
That's good too.
Yeah, in the back.
Yeah, I thought also fantastic story, and for some further development of the mother-in-law, one thing that struck me in the beginning was I thought there would be an interesting tension in if she's lost a son to war, she really could grapple with that for a while before she comes to, kind of pushing for a new sort of proxy son. That was a little bit of a surprise to me that it went so quickly to get married.
Have you shown this to anybody of Afghani background?
I tried, not of background, but there's a woman at my university who has lived in Afghanistan for a long time. And I gave it to her and she didn't respond. So before it goes much farther, it really needs to be read by absolutely.
Maybe someone who hasn't had a chance yet.
In terms of expanding it, an easy way to do that would be to add a subplot. Fully flesh out in its first, or that kind of thing. I don't know what that would do with your composition structure. It looks very well as it is, of course.
Bruce.
Yes, I may have just missed it. The one question I have is when the decision was made to go along with the mother-in-law, because I was trying to follow the words closely. I didn't get all of them. I wasn't sure which way it was going, and then suddenly she had made the decision, and that's a key.
And that's
turn.
something we wrestled with, and that was one of the suggestions that Ben had. He wasn't, and Rachel too, about making that clearer or moving that section to a different spot.
Okay, maybe just two more quick questions in the front.
I was just curious, Jerome, where your knowledge of Middle Eastern and Afghani music came from. It's all very good.
It's not really Afghan. It's really, excuse me, my voice is today. That's really just common romantic music. I listened when we first asked me to do that. I've never done anything like this, so it's just a total new project. And so I got online and listened to all the little chamber operas, and there were these real modern things where the melodies jumped all over creation. And
ready to go.
I know. I'm like signing up for the second year.
Put the music in my head.
Hey, Judy. While we're admiring each other, my favorite part of his music is this solo that Rustine has with the Allah, and the really deep pouring out of there. Okay. Judy, one. The meanest part, right?
Yeah.
Okay. My arms are strong, my back is straight. I choose to pick up duty and lay down dreams of love. Dreams of love. Now I see, Rostine, that soon, all too soon, your need for me will be greater, greater than my need for you. I pledge my life, I will taste the bitter so you can taste the sweet. I will pay the price for the rubies of Kabul. No, he says keep going. Okay. My life, oh no. My arms are strong, my back is straight. I choose to pick up duty and lay down dreams of love. I will pay the price of rubies of Kabul, I will walk the road of loyalty and pray that love will follow me.
So we're going to have to yield the room in a moment. Well, you should all stay, but we have to yield the floor here. But one more quick one. I did see someone over here had a question.
I've lived in the Middle East for about 6 months, and I thought it very relatable. So not Afghanistan specifically, but neighboring. So just kudos.
Thank you. And I guess the biggest question is, what is going to happen to the pomegranate now? You guys going to use that, or?
When it's staged, in the end, the pomegranate is peeled, and when she's singing, she eats the seeds.
Okay. Oh, so it looks mighty tasty. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for being here and for participating and being part of this. I am enormously gratified and inspired to see that we can make something like this happen. And thank you, David, for bringing this together.